And welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Hey, time to check in with Jacob Camenker from USA Today. It's been a couple of weeks, maybe even a month since the NFL draft. Now it's time to take a look at the schedule and see if Jacob has any opinions, certainly on what he has seen transpire. Jacob, great to have you back here on NewsWire. I know we'll be talking a lot later in the summer, but schedules come out yesterday. Let's take a look at some of the teams that released them and see how they potentially affected the season win totals. And I know that you've submitted that you want to talk about some with us. So let's start with the Indianapolis Colts. Their win total is 7.5. Great start for the Colts last season and a horrendous finish. Odds makers are telling us this is not going to be a great year for them. We know that they're going to have quarterback issues at least to start the season. I don't know how they'll finish the season. What did you make of anything in terms of scheduling that came out this season? And do you think that this is a pivotal year for the Colts?
I do think it's a pivotal year for the Colts, Craig. I mean, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard are facing a lot of pressure to deliver, but I'm just not sure it's going to happen for them. I mean, you've got Daniel Jones coming off the torn Achilles, and yeah, he might be ready for week one, but we've seen among all injuries in the NFL, torn Achilles, especially for a quarterback, is one of the toughest to overcome. And do they have an easier schedule on paper than most teams? Yeah, I think they rank about 8th or 9th in strength of schedule. But that start to the season is pretty brutal. I think they have the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Texans out of the gate. The Commanders, if they're healthier, could be better this year. So I'm not sure if the Colts could, stumble out of the gate, maybe not win their first 3 games, and end up in a situation where, like, hey, they're suddenly behind the 8 ball. They've got a quarterback still trying to get into a rhythm. So I just don't like the situation for the Colts this year. I think it's a tough spot for them. So I'm going to be going under on their win total. I think they have some good personnel, but their weaknesses with the quarterback uncertainty and their lack of proven pass rush just scare me off enough to say that, hey, this could be a surprisingly bad season for a team that, we all thought was going to make the playoffs last year before Jones got hurt.
Yeah, definitely so. And hopefully for Jones, he ends up coming back, cashing in once again, maybe on a long-term contract. Okay, so the Lions, that was a real big surprise for me last season, just seeing them fall as fast as they did. I thought the Lions could have been a Super Bowl contender, but they definitely were not the case. They've tinkered a lot this offseason, very specifically with protection of Jared Goff, which they just could not do in those losses last year. Their win total, 10.5. Of course, their schedule comes out. They get a lot of primetime games and national games, Jacob, going into the 2026 season.
Yeah, Craig, I couldn't believe this when I looked at the Lions. They have the easiest measured strength of schedule for the upcoming season, despite playing in the NFC North. And that just makes it so that, last year, obviously a disappointing season, but it was a blessing in disguise for them to finish as the last place team in that division, because they drew 3 easier matchups with their non-rotating last place schedule there. So the Lions are going to have an upper hand on a lot of the non-divisional teams they play. The NFC North games are always going to be tough. They're always going to be back and forth. I feel like the teams almost always end up splitting those series is what it feels like. But you look at what the Lions have done to that offensive line, signing a solid center in Cade Mays, spending a first-round pick on an experienced right tackle, Blake Miller, to help Penei Sewell shift to the blind side. I think the blocking is going to be better. I think the offense is going to be operating better than it was last season with, that was their first year without Ben Johnson, and the John Morton pairing there didn't work out. They're going to give Drew Petzing a shot as their offensive coordinator. But I like what the Lions have done, and I think this schedule is going to allow them to get a lot of wins. So I'm expecting a bounce back year. I'm going to go over this win total. I think they're an 11 or 12 win team that should be in the hunt for that NFC North title once again.
Okay, let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals here, Jacob. And boy, if the Bengals could ever get off to like a 3-1 start or a 4-1 start, you would think that they would be formidable. But unfortunately for them, it's been injuries. Joe Burrow again last year. But the odds makers are telling us that if Burrow is healthy, the Bengals are making the playoffs. Their win total is 9.5. Starting off a season, we have not seen this from odds makers in a really long time, with them being so bullish on Cincinnati. So what gives, Jacob, going into the year? Why is Cincinnati, why do they have such a high win total?
Yeah, so I think it's, again, a strength of schedule situation. I think the Bengals rank 3rd easiest in terms of schedules this year, behind only the Lions. And I believe the Saints rank number 2 overall right now, based on projected win totals for this upcoming season. And I think, to your point, the big question about the Bengals is, can they avoid stumbling out of the block? Because they've been notoriously slow starting under Zach Taylor. They tried to play their starters a little bit more in the preseason last year to kind of reverse that trend, but obviously we didn't see the full effect of that because Joe Burrow couldn't stay healthy. But when Burrow has been on the field, this team has been a consistent winner. So I think anybody who wants to bet the Bengals over is banking on Burrow staying healthy, and these big time defensive acquisitions like Brian Cook at safety, Dexter Lawrence on the defensive line, Boye Mafe on the edge, like those guys should help improve what was a dreadful stop unit last season. So I like the Bengals. I think they can do better, but it's all going to depend on if Joe Burrow can stay healthy. I'll back that for now. That might be a fool's errand, Craig, but I think it's got to happen at some point, right?
You would think, but it just hasn't, and that's really the key here. But Burrow, when he's healthy, I mean, he's as good as any quarterback, honestly, in the NFL. He's that good. Speaking of quarterbacks, Arizona has none. So their win total is set now at 4.5 after their schedule has come out. Outside of Miami, most think that Arizona will be the worst team in the NFL. It could be one of those two, and their schedule isn't easy. And they really didn't do a lot this offseason to make me think that they're going to be much better than they were a year ago. Kyler Murray is, of course, gone. He wasn't even playing at the end. This whole Michael Wilson, Jacoby Brissett combination, that was great, but they weren't winning any games with that. So does anything change this year? And basically, I guess if I had to ask you, Jacob, Miami or Arizona being one of the worst teams in the NFL, who will it be?
I'm going to take the Cardinals as the worst team for the reasons you mentioned. They just don't have a quarterback. And do I like some of their offensive weapons? Sure. I like Jeremiah Love. I like Marvin Harrison Jr. I like Michael Wilson. I like Trey McBride. But if you don't have someone who can consistently get them the ball, they're not going to win a lot of games. And they're playing in the NFC West, one of the toughest divisions in football, with 3 legitimate Super Bowl contenders from last season who all won 12 games, and the Seahawks who won the actual Super Bowl. So I just don't see the Cardinals having much success at all. I think they're not fully tanking, but they're going to be hoping to get an early pick to get a quarterback in next year's draft.
And there are a lot next year. All right. Thanks again, Jacob. Have a good weekend. We'll catch up again before training camp begins in July. Thanks again.
Sounds good, Craig. Take care.
All right. Jacob Camenker from USA Today. We'll be right back.